Bucky Ihlenfeldt from Boone and Crockett Club. Also measure for Pope and Young and Wisconsin Buck and Bear Club. So we're going to go through how to measure a whitetail today. This whitetail is just used for training, scoring, how to measure a whitetail. It's fabricated. I added a couple extra points on it, being this one here and this one here. So it'll help explain the abnormal points and net versus gross. So we're going to take these off for the time being. So any whitetail that's shot in North America, we have a 60-day drying period. After 60 days, when that whitetail is dry, all the skin, flesh, and brain matter is gone from the antlers and head, then we can score that deer. So on a deer like this, I'll get contacted. Do you want me to go through all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get contacted how to score deer, and I'll walk them through the process. So any measure from any of these organizations help each of these entries through the process of entering in the record books. On a deer like this, it's pretty straightforward 10-pointer. He doesn't have any, he's very clean, no other abnormal sticking out in various places, so it's a good training tool. What you do, using a score sheet from Boone and Crockett, and there's other score sheets out there that are all used with Boone and Crockett has to authorize use of those score sheets and scoring system to all these other organizations. So we measure inside spread first. I'll measure going from the inside like this and scrape the carpenter's ruler on the inside of the main beams until I find the smallest spot, which is probably right here. So that is 13, 14, 15 and 2/8. So that measurement will go into the overall score of the deer. There's 2 supplemental measurements that will go in to the score chart, and that's only supplemental data, and it's been used other places, like for if the deer's been stolen, damaged, stuff like that. Actually, if it's stolen, you can prove that it was actually the deer. Those supplemental data are going to be the outside spread, which is here to here, and if there's a tine coming off in a different direction, it's going to be over here, and the tip to tip. And it doesn't matter in the score, it's just added in. After we have the inside spread, using the score sheet, we're just going to use it as a cheat sheet. So it asks you how many points are on the right side. The right side is always on the deer's right side. The left side is always on the deer's left side, not as you're looking at it. Okay, so his right side, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. His left side has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Over here, you can see a small pimple of a point sticking up. Definition of a point has to be 1 inch long, and it has to be longer than it is wide. If you look at this antler here, this point looks like it might be something. It's obviously not 1 inch long, but it also is in the creation of like a wave. And sometimes those points will be short and almost 1 inch, but they'll be wide. So you have to keep track of that. If it's wider than it is long, then it doesn't meet the definition of a point. All right, so back to the score sheet. On his, we'll use his left side. So to measure a main beam, you start at the bottom of the pedicle and the bottom of the main beam. Most of the time it's going to be just above the eye socket, and on a mounted deer it's easier to see than it is on a European. And if you're looking across a pedicle like that, you can see that somewhere probably right in here is across the pedicles. The other side has to disappear. And once you see that disappear, then you know you're at the center of it. So I'm going to take a cable, and you can buy a cable from Boone and Crockett, Pope and Young, or any of these other organizations. It's a little bit bigger than a brake cable of a bicycle, and has a lead end on it. So I'm going to start about, it's hard for me to do that from the side, but I'm going to start there, and I'm going to follow the outside of the main beam where this black line is. So on the outer edge and the outside of the main beam, following that all the way out to the end of the main beam, which happens to be his last tine. Okay, so that's his main beam length. You're going to record that on his left side and his right side. All right, so we have that done. Now we're going to go to tine length. So on the score deer, I marked the bottom of the tines. I usually do that ahead of time because that way when I'll do it over here. I mark the bottom of that tine so that when I'm measuring the main beam, you know that you're in the center of the main beam, but also on the outer edge. Sometimes that beam will roll in and it'll roll out. And this tine here is a good example because you can see how that tine would want to roll in. So you can mark it with a cable, and it would look like if you would just go valley to valley, that it would be something like that. But actually that beam rolls in a little bit. So you're not giving the deer what he grew there. You actually should be down here on that tine. See how that gap is even here? Like it's consistent there, right? With how wide his beam is. And here, if you do that, see how it enlarges it? If it's down here, it doesn't. It makes that consistent all the way through. So it's a judgment call a lot of times. But sometimes that beam will roll in and out, and the tines will roll in and out by the shape of the beam. So you mark all the bottom of the tine, top of the main beam, on each of the points all the way through. Like here. And this one is a little dimple there, so that'd be kind of a uh-oh. So you measure from the inside, you mark the inside of his main beam, and you measure from there. Or else that's giving him a unfair advantage or maybe even a disadvantage over the other side. So going through to tine length, G1, which is the box. So that's why it's called G1. The spot where it's recorded on the Excel sheet. G1, G2, G3, G4. If there's more points out, it's going to be G5, G6, G7, but not including the end of the main beam. Okay, so we have all those marked out. We're going to measure each side G1 from the front and the back so that if they are a little bit longer, sometimes a brow tine will curl in or out, and sometimes you'll measure one from the back on one side and the front on the other, and the measurements will come out exactly the same. So which is good for them, whichever's longer. So measure G1, record that. G2, record that. You're going to do that with a 1/4 inch steel tape with a lip end on it. If it works best, you can use a cable if you need to. So like on this G3, for example, I'll hook the tape on it and follow in the outside edge of it, and I'll bring it down. It's 5 4/8. Everything is measured in eighths. Always eighths, never half, 3/4, always eighths. And that's just for math at the end, so that it's a lot, we keep your denominator the same. So 5 4/8 there, and you just fill out the worksheet that way, okay? Measure G1, G2, G3, and G4. I'm going to go to the other side, measure G1, G2, G3, G4. All right, so his typical frame on this, let's just say he's 150 inches, okay? And that is, oh wait, I almost got ahead of myself a little bit. All right, so we'd measure all the G measurements. Now we're going to go to H measurements. That's a circumference. H1 is going to be between the burr and G1, and it's the smallest point between those two. So we use a different tape that it starts as 0 a little bit ahead of that, a little bit from the end of the tape, and you just pull it tight as you can, and you keep pulling tight till you find the smallest measurement. The smallest measurement, not the biggest. Some people do the biggest. going to pull this one. And that mark there obviously is the smallest because I want to mark it there. So that's 3 and 0. So you're going to add that his circumferences for H1, H2, H3, H4. H1, H2, H3, H4. You're going to do that for each side and record that on both sides. All of those measurements, we're going to go back to the, if it's an 8-pointer. All those measurements are going to give you the gross score. The gross score of what he grew. The net score, which is what Boone and Crockett, and how they developed the scoring system years ago, like in the 30s, when they first started officially scoring everything. They awarded deer by trophy by net score, meaning that the most symmetrical animal is superior to anything else. And that includes non-typical and typical, and we'll get into that in a second. So on this deer, his gross score, let's say he's 150 inches? So at 150, that's his gross score. Now the difference is between this tine and this tine, let's say it's an inch. And this tine and this tine, let's say it's an inch. Okay? Those are going to be deductions because those are not symmetrical. Or they're symmetrical, but they're shorter. So he's a little bit shorter here than he's here. He's a little bit shorter here than he is here. So that's how he's getting his net score. Those are deductions. Okay? So gross versus net. Now, if he did have an abnormal point here, like this one, okay.
What's net entry for a typical?
For a typical whitetail for Pope and Young or state record books is 125 typical and 155 non-typical. It's entered in the record books. For Boone and Crockett, the minimum is 160 and 185. And that is in the awards program. And that record book is produced every 3 years, which is a recording period. Right now, we just got done with the 31st recording period. We're into the 32nd. So that awards that's published once every 3 years, and it's in the awards, and then it drops off. Boone and Crockett is 170 and 195. And that's all time. It's always in the record book, stays in there, that's it. So that's basically how that scoring numbers are. So let's say this guy, this 10-pointer, had this abnormal in here where he grew it. It's out of symmetry, but it also happens to be off the outside of the top of the main beam. It isn't growing in the line with the other ones. Okay, so that's an abnormal point. So we're going to measure what this is and add this up, and that's unfortunately a deduction. Okay, because it's not big enough to be added in as a non-typical. If this was 10 inches and this was 10 inches, then he would qualify to be non-typical. The highest over minimum he grew. So, that makes sense? So, even on a non-typical, you're going to take his frame and let's say it's, what do we say it was, 4 inches? Something like that. His frame's still going to get the deduction of 4 inches, but all of these other points are going to get added back in. So he's going to get awarded by his frame, but all this other stuff gets added back in as a non-typical. So his gross and his non-typical score are going to be really damn close. It's because it's by symmetry.
I have a question. Can we ask questions?
So, you in the back.
When, like, if he grew this point and you had your H measurements, would that go in between here then too?
I would take the smallest between those two.
Between the two, okay.
Yeah.
For your H, whatever.
That's a good question, yeah.
3.
Yep. Well, I'm going to get you a sticker later, okay? So, non-typical versus typical. We talked about the length of main beam, length of tines, circumferences, and the only thing we're going to come back to is on a 10-pointer, or let's just say on this deer, we probably already said this, but G1, G2, G3, G4, and anything else that's after that, G5, G6, and then the end of the main beam. Okay. Once you get the circumferences, H1, H2, H3, H4, if he still has more tines up here, that doesn't get added back in. And I see that happen sometimes. People keep adding those circumferences in between tines as it goes out as main beam, which just turn that 200-inch buck into turn that 160 buck into a 180 buck. So unfortunately, when you have stuff measured on the tailgate of a truck, and the guys might not know how to do it, either the deer gets overscored or gets underscored. So that doesn't give credit to the deer where the credit's due. On a 8-pointer, like this one, because this point didn't match, so I stole the shed from my kid's bedroom this morning. It's actually his kid. It's actually his shed. So the H1 gets taken here between the pedicle, okay, H2, H3, and because we don't have anything here, that line that's going to be between here, this is his tine, where his tine ends. So the top of his tine, or bottom of his tine, and that's about the center of his tine where it comes down, right? So the measurement from here to here, let's say it's 10 inches. At 5 inches, we're going to take circumference here instead of between the next tine or evidence thereof. Okay? So H1, H2, H3, H4. If this was a 6-pointer and he didn't have this, H1, H2, measure between there and here. Let's say it's 12 inches. At 6 inches, you're going to get H3 and H4. You're going to both at the same spot. There.
I have to remember.
Oh, you have this video.
You'll be tested on this
Call
later.
Bucky.
You'll be tested on this later.
Oh, no, that's
There was.
There's a test. So once all that stuff is entered into the score sheet, it's officially measured and it can't be measured again. Once it's officially measured, it can't be measured again. So that's what they call score shopping. So that's why it's good to. That's why I record everything.
Hear that, Doug?
no window shot.
Once the score sheet's done, let's say that's a Pope and Young animal, okay, and qualifies for minimum for Pope and Young. The hunter fills out the county and state it was shot. There might be supplemental data put in there, geographical. Might be a range. Let's say it was shot in Alaska, something like that. But if it's shot in a county in a state, that's all it's listed as. No one will ever know the exact block you shot it on. Most of the time in the Midwest, though, if you do shoot a big buck, everybody knows it. You know what I mean? It doesn't, so, and that's, some people are afraid to enter their deer in, but really in the end it doesn't matter because we're not going to tell anybody where it's shot, and I already know. The nice part about having that stuff entered into the records is that geographical, or not the geographical, but like the scientific data that produced this quality deer for that county in the state, you can capture it there, and that's it. Like in 40, 50 years when I'm gone, if a deer that I shot, it won't mean anything. It might be urban legend, but that's about it. And that dies. Unfortunately, it dies. We're not immortal. But if you entered into trophies, into records, it's always in there. It's a data stamp. So inevitably, we're all like working class scientists, which is cool.
Dang, never been called a scientist before.
But it's scientific data that we're collecting, which is cool. And the entry, it's $40 to enter it for Pope and Young. It's $40 to enter it into Boone and Crockett. And like the state of Wisconsin, it's only $15. Super cheap. And when someone comes in my shop to have something measured, usually you celebrate that deer, it costs you more than $40. Buy 2 18 packs of Bush Light.
That's true.
Deal.
Been there before.
Thanks, Bucky.
Yep, welcome.
Is that it?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's how to measure a whitetail with Bucky. Peace.